Welcome everybody. So this is day 64 of compassionate response to COVID-19, and today I've got my friend Buddhashanti, who I've known for since actually probably 30 years or something like that. And I moved into his house in 1995 when I joined in the Manchester building project, building the Buddhist Centre, and so we'll see a bit more about that later. So yeah, Buddhashanti is a great kind of devourer of like culture. I think that's one way of saying it. Classical music, literature, Proust, all sorts of
Took me a long
Dostoevsky.
time to read him.
Yeah. So as part of the meet the order, Buddhashanti's got a particular, he's got a particular character, just like to kind of like bring out, in the today, and tomorrow he's going to share something with us, some practice with us around green tara.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
yeah. Um, but yeah, before we move on to that, we're going to do some body work to start with, and then some meditation, and then we'll move on to the interview. So if you want to stand up, I'll just move this over to. Okay, so we're going to do about 15 minutes of body work. So begin by just rub your hands together. Rubbing your hands together. Just give your face a little bit of a massage. Can you mute yourself, Buddhashanti? You're making noise.
Yeah, okay.
And take a few deeper breaths. So we're just trying to feel our physical experience as a basis for being grounded in our body in meditation. And just drumming on the top of your head with your fingers. And lightly on the back of your neck. And just brushing down your arms. So we're just going to do a little bit of movement backwards and forwards. So just swinging backwards and forwards, just let your arms swing. Get into a rhythm. So as if you're moving the whole of your spine in one piece, going back. It's staying vertical, but it's going backwards and forwards. And maybe put your thoughts on the other side of the room. So all we're doing is something physical here. And then put the other foot forward, the left foot forward, doing the same on the other side. And just rotating your hips. Trying to keep mind and body together in the same place. So your mind's not ahead of your body and your body's not ahead of your mind. Just doing very kind of deliberate movements to the front, to the side, to the back, to the side again, to the front. And then just put one arm over the top there and just pulling up on this side, little movements backwards and forwards, and pushing down on the other side. So stretching up on the one side, pushing down on the other side. And then do the other side. Give everything a shake out. And just brushing off your face. Lightly brushing off the ends of your arms. And then take a seat for meditation. Buddhashanti. Okay. So you're muted, Buddhashanti. Okay, so I'm going to lead us in mindfulness breathing meditation for about 15 minutes or something like that. So just settling into your meditation posture. So we're just going to do the traditional 4 stages. So watching the breath come in, watching it go out, and counting at the end of the out breath in the first stage. Breathe in, breathe out, count 1. Breathe in, breathe out, count 2, and so on until you get to 10, and then breathe in, breathe out, count 1, 2, and so on. That's the first stage, and then in the second stage you just move the count to just before the in-breath. In the third stage we drop the counting altogether, and the fourth stage we just watch the delicate sensations of the breath around the nose and mouth where the breath first enters the body. Mindfulness of breathing. I'm moving the counting to just before the breath begins. in the last stage, just watching the delicate sensations of the breath, where the breath first enters the body.
Interesting. Yeah.
What?
Won't be a second.
Okay.
Here I am again.
I can't see you.
You can't?
No, I just see a chair.
All right.
Oh, that was weird. How'd you do
Can
that?
you, can you see me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It must have been a broadband problem or something. Yeah, no, that's
Right.
fine.
All
Yeah.
right. I vanished.
Yeah, you vanished and you just the chair, but you were speaking.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh well.
yeah. All right, so yeah, so So this session is called Introducing Buddhashanti, and yeah, so Buddhashanti and me have been friends for
About 25 years since 95.
yeah, something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
25 years
yeah,
plus, yeah,
yeah.
more or
Well,
less.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of knew each other before that, didn't we? In the ordination training process.
I don't think I've met you, but I'd seen your name. I'm not sure whether I'd met you before you
Yeah,
moved up to Manchester, but
yeah,
I
yeah,
did see, I did know of your existence. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I'd been in London and for 17 years, and then I was at West London Buddhist Centre, and then kind of felt like I'd kind of had enough of London. A lot of my friends had left. That repeatedly happened. In London, people it's a bit of a transient population sometimes. So, so in the end, I left and came back to Manchester, where I'd been at university, and at the time there was a building project going on. So in October '94, the Manchester Buddhist Centre moved. Well, they bought this warehouse, like 5-story warehouse, right in the centre of Manchester for I think £90,000 or something ridiculous. And then there was a team of young guys, sort of working on converting the building. So yeah, it took nearly 2 years to do the whole building with a team of a kind of team of maybe about 12 people. But then there's so much helping from the Manchester Buddhist Centre community. People would come in the evenings and strip paint work or do it. Just we had to rip everything out of the building and just create a beautiful Buddhist centre. So I joined in this in I moved into Buddhashanti's house in January '95, and then was kind of helping out voluntarily, doing plumbing and things like that. So so that's the context of us first meeting. Here's the back of the building. It's a beautiful building, really. Look at that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it used to be an old textile facility, warehouse thing. They used to call them soaks because they'd often get a leak in the roof, and then they'd move a floor down to get away from the water, that sort of thing. So the whole area was kind of the sort of building, Industrial Revolution type buildings in the centre of Manchester. So Manchester was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, really, and in a way, it was one of the most important places in the world at a certain point. The beginning of industry. So yeah, so it's a very kind of proud city. Proud of its heritage, proud of the people it's produced. Like Rutherford split the atom in Manchester, and there's lots of Nobel Prize when Anthony Burgess wrote Clockwork Orange. But Manchester, there's Manchester and there's Salford. So Salford is on the north side of Manchester, and Salford people have a kind of
it's on the west, really.
northwest.
Yeah, the west.
Yeah. And so Buddhashanti grew up in Salford, and so I think bands like The Fall come from Salford. It's kind of very kind of earthy, kind of gritty sort of background. So do you want to talk a bit about your upbringing in Salford, Buddhashanti?
Yeah, happy to do that. I was I was born in the heart of Salford, and I was born in late 1948, so I'm pretty old. Right in the centre of Salford, Langworthy area. And my father was a plumber, and my mother was a housewife, and she earned extra money by by cleaning, and I had a sister who was 3 years younger than me. And I just lived in Salford all the time. So there was a park nearby, which was good. But we rarely got out into the countryside, so I was just kind of an inner city child, really, and just, the streets were my kind of playground, because when I was born and when I grew up, there were no cars in the streets. If there was a car in the street, that was very unusual. So things were quite quiet around the streets. And I went to a local school, and the headmaster at the school had taught my father when he was a child. My father was born in 1920, so when I was born, he was about 28. So it was quite a settled community. And so I went to that school from the nursery school at 5 through into the infants, and then there was the 11 plus, and I didn't pass my 11 plus. And so I stayed at the school, and at that time there were new secondary moderns, and they were being built, but I lived in a catchment area where I stayed at the same school. So the classes were reduced from about 40, up to 11, 35, 40 in a class, to about 15 in a class. So from about 11 to 15, I was in a class, quite a small class at school. And there was no opportunity to take O-levels or anything. So I left school at 15 without qualifications.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you could get things like apprenticeships easily just by the good school report. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So my education was quite basic, really. What do they call it? Reading, writing, arithmetic, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I got a job.
Yeah, Karen.
Yeah. So I got a job. I was really my interests from about 11 to 15 were making models. I'd set up kind of a workshop up in my bedroom. I have my own bedroom, which is stood in the attic. So I just made models of aircraft and boats and all kinds of things. So I was really quite practical. So I wanted to be an engineer. So I got an apprenticeship in an aircraft factory the other side of Manchester, which I travelled to every day. First cycling, I think, and then I got my bike stolen, couldn't afford another one, so I went on the bus. So that was kind of my life in a way for quite a few years, travelling, getting up about 6:15 in the morning. And I only reflect on this years later, but my mother used to get up and cook me egg and bacon every morning at about 6:15, and then go back to bed, And I got on the bus and went to work and, took my apprentice thing. Yeah. Yeah. So, I've been thinking about what I might say, and, obviously I was affected by the music of the time. It was a time when the Beatles were first coming to existence in the mid-60s, and the Rolling Stones. So I did like those, but also it was the time of blues, real blues like Muddy Waters and Sonny Boy Williamson, and there were tours of those, because for some reason they came to England from America, and they were treated in a much better way, and people were much more enthusiastic about seeing these singers in England, and some of them settled in the north, some of them. And so I used to go to a club called the Twisted Wheel, where it specialised in blues. There were English blues singers like John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, and there was a group called Spencer Davis Group with a singer called Stevie Winwood. I mean, does he ring any name bells for you? Yeah. So I saw them. He was about 18. Amazing. He had this amazing voice. So there was quite a thriving small club scene at that time. A few years ago, I thought, well, I'll click on see what's on the internet, and there's a kind of nostalgia group for people with memories of the Twisted Wheel, you know, who are about my age. Yeah. And there was another club called the Oasis, and I used to go there and I saw the Who, you know, in this small club with about 400 people. Kinks and other groups like that before they started going to vast stadiums. Yeah, so it was interesting. Yeah.
And you were at a kind of famous event, weren't you, really? Where Bob Dylan, you know, at the Free Trade Hall. Do you want to say a bit about that?
I was a great fan of Bob Dylan. And I just like the folk thing, you know. His first two LPs were very much folk based, and so I began to get into Bob Dylan. And he was doing one of his, I don't know whether maybe it was his first tour of Britain, I'm not sure, but he was touring with a band, and so there were rumours that he was, you know, going electric. And so I went to this concert in mid 1966. I was about 17, and in the first part, he just there with his guitar singing his classic songs like Tambourine Man and all these very famous songs. Really, I got a recording of it about 20 years later. You know, incredibly atmospheric performances. And then in the second half, he came on with his band, Electric, and it was incredibly loud, and people started booing and shouting, and you know, and I didn't boo because I was just a bit bewildered, really. I thought, why is he doing this? But I didn't boo. And I remember one incident. I mean, there's the famous one where somebody shouts Judas, you know, but he just carried on. But there was another incident which I remember when there was this young girl came down, and she kind of handed him a note. Maybe it was saying, please don't play with this band. And he just, you know, took the note and put it in his pocket and just carried on playing. So I remember that more than the booing, actually.
Yeah.
And, so I was just a bit bewildered. And I just wondered, why is he doing this? But then months later, he started buying bringing it all back home. And I was really enjoying things like Subterranean Homesick Blues and all the rock stuff.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't realise that this became a classic concert, because for years it was known as the Albert Hall concert, where actually it was the recording, and it was recorded in the Free Trade Hall, that famous Judas thing. Yeah. So that,
I mean,
and I saw him. I saw him a few other times. Yeah, but I always liked Bob Dylan. I'm not kind of an avid. I've got to get all his bootleg songs, but I've got a lot of his LPs, and he's entered my mind. You know, I know some of his lyrics by heart, and it's just lovely to meet somebody. If you meet somebody who's a real Dylan fan, you can just exchange lyrics, you know, and quotes and things. So he's entered my being, I suppose.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Manchester University from 1973 onwards, and that, you know, like a Rolling Stone, you know, it's such a anthem, really, for you know, it's a joyful anthem, you know. So that was the song that followed immediately. Somebody saying Judas. So it's like saying, no, this is what I'm doing. So I've actually got a clip I can play here of it. Oops. Hang on.
I believe you.
It goes on for 6 minutes,
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
on for
yeah.
a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were there.
Yeah, I was there, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just reflecting about what I would, what I would say. And there are other things I mean, but I'd never been educated very much about literature and things. I remember at school that I did particularly, we used to do readings from Shakespeare, and I particularly enjoyed that, but I don't think it ever went in any deep kind of way. And there was an incident which I often reflect on, which started me getting into, literature in a particular way. I was doing this apprenticeship, and sometimes you'd be put on the shop floor, and there wouldn't be very much for you to do. So sometimes I just get a bit bored, and one particular morning, I decided, well, I just didn't feel like going to work. It was probably one early winter morning, and so I left home at the normal time, because I didn't say anything to my parents that I wasn't going to work. And I just went to sit in the park in this summer shed, and it was dark. It was probably before dawn, probably about 6:45 in the morning. And I just wondered what I would do during that day. And then, I don't know where this idea came from. I used to read things like science fiction and then spy novels and crime novels and stuff. And then the idea came to me that, well, maybe I could explore literature that was written sort of a few hundred years ago. And I've just no idea where that idea came from. But I was just looking at these trees in this sort of dawn light, and I thought, I'll go to town and I'll buy a book. And I thought, I'll buy Gulliver's Travels, because I knew that was an old book. And so that's what I did. And that kind of started me off in exploring literature, really. So in some ways it was quite a magical thing, because nobody had took me by the hand and said, oh, read this and read that. It just came to me.
Yeah.
And then I remember sort of exploring bookshops and seeing Tolstoy. I thought, Tolstoy, I've heard of him. And I bought his Anna Karenina, which is the first literature novel, which I read, which is a huge book, about 800 pages. And I started to read that, and I can remember an incident travelling home on the bus, and it begins with like a social event, a soiree, with the central character, Pierre. I think it's I can't quite remember his name now, but he's very like Tolstoy. There are two characters in it, and one's very like Tolstoy, and he's a bit not very good socially, and he's in this sophisticated party, and he says something which he thinks is quite witty, and it gets a response, and then he says it again to somebody else, and somebody else there who said, oh, you said that twice. And I thought, oh, this man's is showing himself to be foolish. The writer is showing his hero to be foolish and a bit not aware. And that kind of struck me. I thought, this is about real things. And I remember that I thought, I'm going to explore more and more of this, because I'd just read books before where the heroes were, they weren't real people in some ways. So I still remember those incidents. It was like a switch was flipped on. And so I just began to explore these areas of literature myself, really, without having any teacher to show me the way, really.
Yeah.
So that was quite important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like your idea, wasn't it, rather than somebody else's idea?
Yeah, that's
sort of really important, that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't know anybody else. I started, obviously I had friends who I met at work, and I went to night school and then went to technical college, and had friends who were, quite good friends really. But there was nobody I could talk to about this kind of stuff. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just explored it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you told me about a time when you just went, the famous painter L.S.
Oh,
Lowry.
yeah.
You just went around, knocked on his door, and said hello.
Well, yeah, I did paint. I mean, I think I started painting when I was about 16. I've been picked to go to a class when I was at school have you heard of Harold Riley?
No.
No, he's a local Salford artist, still alive, I think. And he was influenced by Lowry, and he did classes on Saturday at Buell Hill Park, and I was selected to go to that. There was a group of kids who had some, could paint a little bit. So I got an interest in painting then. And yeah, I got interested in just painting. And Lowry, I knew because my dad used to take us round Salford Art Gallery, me and my sister, on Sundays occasionally. And so that was a bit of an education in a way. We just looked at, and there were lots of Lowry paintings. And so I got to know them. And he became a kind of model, really, about how to paint Salford. I didn't go outside Salford on my own, And so I got this book, a biography of him, quite a potted biography, and it said, he was very welcoming to visitors, people would just pop round. And I took it at face value, really, about, how old was I? Probably about 18. And I took another one of these days off work and thought about it, and then went out to Mottram and Longondale and got the bus there. I didn't know the number of the place, so I just went into the local corner shop and asked, where does Mr. Lowry live? And they told me, so I just walked down the road and knocked on his door.
Yeah. So hang on, I've got So this is the house.
That's his house. Yeah, just on the main road at Mottram.
Yeah.
So, and I just said, I like your paintings, Mr. Lowry. I've just come to visit you, and he invited me in.
Yeah.
I spent about 2 hours with him. He was just really kind of interested in, just this young guy about, how old was it? Just about 18. I just turned 18.
Yeah.
And he showed me his studio at the back. He had this lean-to studio at the back with a glass roof where he did his painting. And there were lots of canvases there. And his lounge was sort of cluttered with it. I've got a picture here of him sat, stretched out on a. Can you see that?
Yeah.
This was given to me by a friend years and years later, and we sat talking, and I told him that I'd not taken any of my drawings and paintings, and he invited me back so I could show him the paintings that I'd done. So it was just really curious about my responses to things, and just very friendly. I mean, he came over in the same way that he comes over in documentaries of somebody who's just finds human beings kind of fascinating in quite an ordinary way. And it was just very easy to be with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
and on his...
Here's a picture of him. I think this is probably a couple of years before you went to see him.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1964. So I think you were then 66.
That would be in the studio that I talked about.
Yeah.
And he had on the landing, just at the bottom of the staircase, there were these waistcoats which he would wear, and they're all covered in paint, and he put them on when he was painting, because he just painted in his suit in a way. Yeah. So I went back, took in my paintings, and he was duly complimentary. I even took him back an oil painting, which I I still have actually. About three of my paintings have survived, and two of them I decided to frame. And yeah, he was quite complimentary. And he did at the time. His biography hadn't been written, and it wasn't known that he just worked as a rent collector for most of his life, really, and he painted it in the evenings and at weekends. And he said, "Well, don't try to earn a living by painting." He said, he didn't. He just tried to discourage me from trying to think I could do that, because he hadn't done that. And that painting that you showed me of that painting of a young woman, I think that was at the bottom of his stairs, and he said to me, "She's a really special young woman, you go and visit her and she's always ready on time." But I don't know whether that was true or not, whether that was, he actually had any relationships. I'm not sure about that. But maybe he had some fantasy about that. But he was just really friendly and encouraging. So I felt quite elated when I came away on both occasions.
Yeah.
And, I still continue to admire and like his paintings, although my taste in paintings has grown a great deal since then, but I still find him very interesting to look at. And there are some of his paintings which showed his loneliness, really. There are a few where he paints a picture of just a sea, just a calm, slightly ruffled sea with the sea merging into the horizon in quite pale, creamy white colours, and they're just quite bleak in a way. But there's a kind of just looking at that emptiness. Yeah, so he must have been quite a lonely man in lots of ways. Yeah, so he's an interesting painter. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you got interested in it. Just appeared to you that literature from hundreds of years ago. Oh, that's maybe I'll start looking at that. And then, so you worked at is it Withington Hospital or something?
Well, that was later. I mean, I left. I worked at the same place until I was in my about 22, 23. So I served the apprenticeship, and I did quite well studying, studying technical subjects. And I left my job to do an MSc in Birmingham, in Aston, University of Aston. I wanted to be a design engineer. So I moved to Birmingham for probably about 9 months. But my maths was not good enough, so I didn't pass. So I came back, not having succeeded in doing the MSc, and I was supposed to have resit it about a year later. But I got a job. I got what I consider to be a good job with my qualifications as an assistant maintenance manager in a hospital, and that's why my engineering building services started from my mid-20s. Yeah. So that's how I became an engineer working in hospitals. So I've not had a kind of artistic background at all.
And how?
But it's interesting.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, go on. So, yeah.
Well, I was going to say that my parents were always kind of supportive in quite a non-demonstrative way, really. They didn't argue against me going to Birmingham to do this MSc. I wanted to do it, and I was just allowed to do it. In lots of ways, my parents just allowed me to do things. I went hitchhiking when I was about 16, and they never said, "Oh, don't do that, son, that's dangerous." And so I come back from leaving my fairly secure job, and I'd failed the MSc. You know, I had to resit it, and they just said, "Oh, you're back." Oh, and that, you know, there was no kind of criticism of, "Well, you've messed that up, son, haven't you?"
Yeah.
Nothing like that, and I just really appreciated that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just started looking for work, but I used to spend what did I do? I spent the morning looking for work, and then the afternoon just doing what I wanted to do, basically. So I read a lot and read quite a lot of philosophy just in the afternoons. And over a period of about 4 months, I eventually had interviews and got a job. And you could sign on then, and they weren't harassing you to get work. They would just allow you, and I was trying to get a job. So in some ways, it was good. I had 2 periods of unemployment in my life, both about 4 months. And I used to approach it the second time in the same way. In the morning, I'd look for work, and then in the afternoon, I'd just take the time off, you know, reading, swimming, going for walks, and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I just really appreciate my parents for their undemonstrative support. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
And so, how did you? When did you come across Buddhism? And
Well, not for a long time. Not until my late. How old was I? 87. So I would have been 38. So there was from me coming back from Birmingham in my early 20s to my late 30s. What did I do? Well, I progressed in my career. You know, I became a manager and a maintenance manager and things. But and I really got into. I mean, this might sound a bit dull, but it made a big difference to my life. When I was about 20, I discovered hill walking, and Sundays had always been, you know, Sundays at that time were quite dull. You know, things were closed in the early 70s, you know, right through 50s and 60s. Nothing very much happened on Sundays. Place just shut down, and I used to get really bored, and, you know, what do you do with these days? And then I discovered hill walking, and then that's what I did on Sundays, and that kind of transformed my life in a way. It was a bit like I learned to be on my own in a really kind of positive way. It was akin, when I started meditating, I realised that some of the states of mind I used to get into when I used to go hill walking. And so that was kind of my refuge, I suppose, during that time from my early 20s to my late 30s. I used to do that a great deal. And I got this job as assistant maintenance engineer, and then we moved around a bit, and I met a guy who was kind of doing an Open University course, and it's been speaking to me, and he knew that I was quite widely read. I've read quite a lot, and he started talking to me about, you know, what do you think? You know, we're studying this. Have you read this? And I realised, well, if this guy can do an OU degree, you know, I can. You know, I thought, well, that's what I'll do. And so from about 28 to 34, I did 6 years of OU study in English literature and philosophy. And I thought, well, I've done enough engineering qualifications, and I wanted to do something I was really interested in, you know. So that's what I did. And the first year was really good in that you had a study group, met every week, and they had this tutor, Anne Dowling, who she was just really good. And I thought, this is the first time I've met anybody who'd actually understood this, this interest in literature and philosophy. So I got on with her really well, and the other people in the study group as well. So that was just great. And we used to meet at the Manchester Business School on a maybe Monday night, and there was a nice bar there. And so we used to go out for a drink afterwards. So that was the kind of first time that I'd started to meet kindred people, really, apart from when I used to go on holidays. I used to hostel in Scotland and other places, and I'd meet people who I got on with there. But in my home environment, work, I didn't meet people who were interested in the same things as I was, Engineers, mostly engineers, are not really interested in literature and philosophy and classical music and that kind of thing. So it's when I started doing OU stuff that I met people who had a similar kind of interest. Yeah.
So I mean, your house in Monton, you're not there now, are you? You moved.
No.
But you were in it for how many years? Yeah, it's a long time, wasn't it?
A long time, yeah. I was in there for 30 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and it just got more and more books in it, and just up the walls and everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, what happened was that I did this OU degree and finished it in my probably about 34. And I thought, well, I can use this now. So I wanted to go into teaching. So I did a PGCE in North Wales. I left my job again. I had this good job. I was well paid. I was a manager. I was sort of responsible for maintenance in a hospital. So I had a sort of staff of about 20 who I managed. And so I gave that up in my mid-30s to do this teaching PGCE in North Wales. And again, I met groups of people. Most of them were in their early 20s. There were a few people in about the same age as me. And to the people in their early 20s, I was kind of an old guy. I was 35. But I got on with them very well. But I decided that we used to travel up and down the North Wales coast. We'd be dropped off at particular schools to do our teacher training. And that was not very good in that you weren't there all the time with the children. You were there 3 days, a gap, 3 more days. So you couldn't establish a regime of discipline with the kids. And so I had real problems with discipline. I was just too kind to them. And so I decided that teaching really wasn't for me, but I completed the degree, the postgraduate job, but decided not to go into teaching. And so I came back. And by this time I got my own flat. I'd left. I didn't leave home until my late 20s. When I started my OU degree, I got a flat of my own. And so I'd lived on my own for about 8 years. I came back from this PGCE and then went back into engineering because I was a bit lost. I'd put loads of kind of weight in changing my career and becoming a teacher. And that didn't happen because I just thought I'd just have so much a stressful time being a teacher. And so I was a bit lost, really. And so I bought a house. I thought, well, I can do that. I can settle down here and try and become an engineer again. And then I saw this advert for meditation. And I was really struggling with the work and trying to do studying again. I couldn't really get into that. And I thought, well, I'll try meditation. It'll clear my mind, I thought. And I'll do that for 6 weeks and it'll set my mind clear. and I'll get on with following a career again. So that's what I did. I went along to a meditation course at the Manchester Buddhist Centre. And just continued to go, because I kind of, what happened in meditation was that quite soon I became quite focused, and I started to have these upwheel feelings of really positive emotion, joy, and that just came up just by following the breath. And that gave me a real confidence, because what had been happening, because I'd listened to music for years, and I'd listened to, I'd read literature, and I was really into poetry. Sometimes I would get this connection with the music or the literature or the poetry, but it would go away. It was as though it was there for a while and it would go away. And I began to think, well, there's nothing permanent there. It's like I get stimulated by the music, get stimulated by the literature. And then when the literature stops, that sense of joy goes away. Mm. But when I was meditating, and just by following the breath, I got this sense of something really positive within me. I felt, that was what the music was doing, what the art, the literature was doing, was connecting with that positive nature in me. And so meditation made me realize that there was something within me which I could encourage, So I got confidence in meditation through that kind of connection, really. Obviously, in meditation, that feeling comes and goes as well, but it's there. It's possible to contact it and develop it.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was really important, and that happened within maybe 3 or 4 weeks of meditating.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I just thought, I want to find out more about the Dharma.
Yeah.
So I just continued doing Dharma courses, and at the Buddhist Centre.
Yeah.
And I got a job, and the job was all right. I enjoyed the work, but and then I was quite slow in meeting people because I was quite shy, and I'd had friends at work, but I didn't have a network of friendships really, because when work changed, I lost connection with those friends. So for a long time, I just didn't have any regular friends. That period from, say, my mid-20s to my mid-30s, I was very much on my own, exploring things. And, So gradually, I started to develop friendships within FWBO, as then was.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. I mean, what you're saying about meditation, I mean, for me, that's sort of there in your name, so you've given the name Buddhashanti, which means he who's has the peace of the Buddha or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like just came naturally, really, when you start to meditate, that this peacefulness came over you and stuff.
That kind of tranquility, and joy, Yeah.
And I've always seen you as very methodical, bit like Immanuel Kant having his daily walk and all that sort of thing. So when it came to cultivating friendships, which we were encouraged to do in Tree Ratner, in FWO then, you just did it really systematically, Right, I'm going to meet up with people. I think you really set that up,
Yeah, I do reflect back on that, and I thought it was a bit mad, really, because I used to meet up with so many different people because this was considered the thing to do. I thought that was a bit mad, really, but because lots of the people, I thought, well, where are they now? Some of the people like you and now Marty, who's resigned, and Olaf and other people, I'm still in contact with. Yeah, but lots of people, they just go away. Yeah, but I probably did.
Yeah. So I mean, that for me, that's that steadiness in you that's been sort of quite impressive, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in you when you were showing pictures of the Buddhist Centre. I was quite involved in that because I sort of sorted out the design of the heating system and the electrical system and that kind of thing. I remember going round there with Moksha Priya and Subhadra because they knew I was a professional engineer, and they were it was this complete shell of a building. And they thought, it'll take us 3 to 6 months to do this, And I thought that and and 3 times as much, I just didn't say anything. But it took them 2 years. Yeah. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Liverpool Buddhist Centre? So you've been very key in helping establish Liverpool Buddhist Centre, which is a lot smaller.
Yeah,
so here's a picture of the centre now. I've got a picture of...
good. Oh, you're very good.
It's right round the corner from the Cavern Club in central Liverpool.
Yeah.
Beautiful building, isn't it?
We've only got the second floor, by the way.
Yeah.
It's not another Manchester Buddhist Centre by any means.
Yeah.
Well, what happened there was that I asked for ordination. When was it? In 91, I think. And then you start going on ordination retreats, and I met Mangala. On those. It looks very much the same now, even though he's probably about 30 years older. And I struck up a kind of friendship with him, and he moved up to Liverpool to start Buddhist centre there, and I got ordained in 96, and I just thought, well, I'll help him. He's on his own, and I just thought, well, I'll go over and help him. And nobody asked me to. He didn't really ask me to, but I just thought I would do that. I thought when I get ordained, I can do things like that. So that's what I started to do. I was still teaching in Manchester, doing classes in Manchester, but I used to go over from about late 97 once a week to support their Sangha evening. And just got to know people there. Again, looking back on it, I was probably in my late 40s then, and I go over, get the train over directly from work, and then I used to get a late train back about 11:15 because the class wouldn't finish until after 10, and then I'd get home, get to bed about 12:15, and then I'd be up in the morning at about 6:15 to go to work. And usually I was starting the latter part of that period. I would cycle as well, so I just thought, what kind of energy did I have then? But I got to know the Sangha over a period of about 3 years and started going on retreats with them. And he decided to leave because he was feeling quite lonely. I think the Sangha was mainly of people working with families, and there was no, independent, young, unattached young people really. And I thought, well, I got to know the Sangha so well that I thought I can't just not keep it going. So I decided to keep it going and started travelling over regularly and doing Sangha evenings, and then starting to do courses as well. And a lot of that time, for a long time, from about 2002 for about 5 or 6 years, maybe longer, I was just doing that on my own. doing courses and things, getting help from mitras, and So I just did that out of a sense of loyalty, really, to the Sangha, and it slowly developed. You know, we got some of the deeper became ordained. Vilasavadra moved up. At various times, people came over to help, and Buddhashanti came up to help. He got involved for about 18 months, 2 years, but then he started to have a family and stopped. So I just continued with it, really, out of a sense, just a sense of loyalty and enjoyment. I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it very much. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was often, well, it's only recently that you've bought. Have you bought part of that building?
No. It's just we still rent. We lease the place. Yeah. We moved around so much as well. I think if I count the number of times that we've moved in that in a period of from 2002 to now, I mean, it's a long time, isn't it? 18 years, incredible. We've moved about 8 times. We've usually stayed at one place for about 3 years, and then moved due to various circumstances. So we've moved a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just very slowly developed.
Yeah. I always liked the places that you were generally, you know, like you had in Liverpool, you've got the 2 cathedrals that you've got Paddy's Wigwam, which is the Catholic cathedral. And you've got the Anglican cathedral, and you've got Hope Street, which runs between the Catholic and the Protestant cathedrals in Liverpool, you know. Often the centre would be on Hope Street, wouldn't it, or nearby? You know?
Well, it's surprising, really. Mangala was in Hope Street. Then we moved out. He had
a flat there, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, he had a flat there. And then we moved out because they were upgrading Hope Street, and then we moved back, and then we didn't get on really well with the landlord, so we moved again. But it's interesting. I just reflect on this sometimes, that the places that we've been in have either been demolished or become derelict. You know, you look at the places that we've been in. We were in the Gostin building for a while, and that's derelict now. The centre that we moved from about three years ago is still empty, and Hope Street, where it started, is empty. It's surprising. And the hospitals that I worked at, you know, I worked at Salford Royal. I was responsible for a skin hospital. I worked at Hope Hospital, Withington, and they've all been demolished.
Buddhashanti, what are you doing? You're shutting everything down.
So I put a curse on the place. It's interesting. But Withington, a huge hospital, is now, apart from the listed buildings, has been demolished, and it's just residential properties. So all the hospital, and it's interesting, really. So the places that I've worked at, you know, my whole professional life, as buildings have been demolished or have changed out of recognition. And I used to cycle from where I lived in Eccles to my school, and for years and years the school was there that I went to. And then one day I cycled past and it was being demolished. So it's interesting, isn't it? What? Things just change, and So, but the place where we're at now is the best place. You know, it's sort of well looked after. It's nice rooms, and we've got fair amount of space. So it's a good place. It's interesting, you talk about these, and there's a whole kind of area, you know, we talk about my interest in literature and things, and not spoken about any particular writers, really.
Well, do you want to say something? No, you know, there's still time.
I'm not sure.
Anything you want to talk about? Like 10 minutes or something.
Well, there is. I was waking up overnight, thinking, well, what would I talk about? And it's the way things happen by chance. Really, you're attracted to things for reasons you can't quite understand. Like, why did that idea of looking at literature in the park, why did that come to me? And why did I start to read Tolstoy? And there's a writer who I've read nearly all his books, and I'm still really fascinated by, a writer called John Cooper Powys, who becomes famous for brief periods and then disappears again. And I think it was in 1982. I was in a bookshop in Wilshaws in Manchester, before Waterstones, I think, and I saw this book called Wolf Solent by John Cooper Powys, and it had this quite attractive picture by Graham Sutherland on the front, and the name Wolf Solent and the name John Cooper Powys. I thought, oh, that sounds interesting, I'll buy that. And it was a big 600-page novel, and I read it. I was doing this walking, the Uffersdyke Path, from Chepstow up to Rill, and it follows the path of an earthwork. And I read this book, and I thought, this writer is just writing for me. He entered into the characters' inner lives with really a great deal of richness, and also described the natural world with sort of great sensuousness. And the characters were interesting, and they had real kind of difficulties, and their delusions were being broken, but there was a sense of positive connection with nature. And I thought, this writer's really for me. And so I just started to explore him. And there's a famous work, probably his most famous one, but it's about 1,000 pages, called A Glastonbury Romance. Have you heard of that?
Yeah,
Yeah, well, that's his most famous book. But I've read lots and lots of his work, and he becomes sometimes in literary magazines he's referred to a few times, and you think, oh, he's going to become popular, or it's going to become sort of part of the curriculum or something, part of the canon, but he never quite does.
Yeah.
So he's got a small following. I actually joined the John Cooper Powys Society and have been to a few of their meetings. So he's a great writer, but not very well known. And it's interesting, he's got connections. He lived in Corwin for, just near where Vajraloka is, from the 1950s, to the 1930s to the 1950s. So I visited his house in Corwin, where he used to live. And then he moved to Blaenau Festiniog further into Wales, and he lived there, so I've been there. So he's kind of, I find him a kind of teacher in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he comes from a very unusual family.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 shelves of his books, and books on him.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of a major discovery for me, and and affected me quite a lot in lots of ways.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, one thing that maybe don't notice you doing it so much these days, but I often kind of notice how you have quite a sort of sensual kind of relationship with the world. You're often like stroking things.
Touch things. Yeah, I know. I
sort of stroking.
Yeah. I'm doing that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing that now. Yeah. So he's got that kind of sensuous relationship with the world. I think that's why I found him so interesting.
Yeah.
But also, there's a strong mythical element too. In A Glastonbury Romance, it's set in Glastonbury, and you've got all the mythical context of the Grail legend, and there's the legend that Joseph of Arimathea, who was at Christ's crucifixion, visited Glastonbury. You've got all kinds of mythical connections, and so it connects with the myths of Buddhism as well. In my mind, the mythical, imaginative life of archetypal figures and that kind of thing. So it's very much alive in the characters' lives, which can put some people off, but for me, it encourages me to read them. I mean, it creates a rich atmosphere. Yeah.
So that's what you're kind of interested in, isn't it? Really, a rich inner life,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm probably quite fortunate in lots of ways that I could have that. Yeah. So it would have been interesting to meet John Cooper Powys. I probably would have, if I'd have been alive, I'd have gone to meet him.
Yeah.
But he died in 90. He was at 90, but he died in 1963. So he died well before I even got to know him. But he'd be the sort of character as if you wrote to him, he would definitely reply. So I never got the chance to meet him. Yeah.
Well, a bit like Sangharakshita, isn't it? I mean, if you write to him, if you'd written to him, he would definitely.
He does reply. He did reply. I've got a card from him. I've got two, I think, but I think I've lost one. Yeah, he does. He did reply. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Taking people seriously, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. I once asked Sangharakshita, you mentioned about Proust, Marcel Proust, and I have read him. It took me a very long time to read him, and I asked Sangharakshita, have you read Proust then? And he said he didn't answer the question. He just told me that he'd read Lord of the Rings twice, but he didn't answer. So I presume he hadn't.
No.
He didn't want to say no, if not. So that was interesting.
Yeah. So Proust writes really long, very long,
very long sentences. Yeah. It's very. I mean, it's quite. If you've got the time, and you've not got the distractions, it's very entertaining. Because he again describes the world in a very kind of sensuous way and enters into the characters' inner lives. And also, he's quite funny as well. Once you get into him, there are some really humorous characters and quite eccentric characters, a bit like Dickens in a way, but much richer inner lives. Yeah. But from starting reading it, I've got these 3 volumes. They're about 1,000 pages each. And I've listed when I started to read it, and some I read really quickly, but some I stopped reading and then didn't start again for 5 years later. So it took me 17 years from starting to finishing. Yeah. So, and I thought some people might have died in that time. So so unfortunate that I haven't lived long enough to finish reading Proust. Yeah.
Cool.
Anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
So shall we leave it there? And,
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you. I've revealed parts of myself that I've not revealed in public before.
Yeah.
There's lots more as well, but anyway.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
What time is? How long was that?
That was an hour, and the whole thing's an hour and 35 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Wow. Cool. All right. Well, tomorrow I'm going to lead a visualization simple visualization on Green Tara and the devotional practice to Green Tara.
Yeah.
Tomorrow. Yeah. And I'll say more about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
So do I do that after you've done your exercises
Yeah,
and things.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right then.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
Thanks, Marbo.
Thanks again,
Thank
Buddhashanti.
you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
All
Yeah.
right.
Bye.
Bye.